The false dawn of peace, the greatest celebration in galactic history. The golden spires of Luminara Prime pierced the purple sky like victory banners frozen in time. Across the crystal towers and floating platforms, billions of beings from every corner of the galaxy gathered to witness history. Today marked the end of the longest and bloodiest conflict the galaxy had ever seen. The Void Harbingers, those twisted creatures from the dark space between stars, had finally been defeated after 50 years of brutal warfare. Admiral Zephix of the Aquilon Empire stood on the highest balcony of the Coalition Command Center, his blue-scaled hands gripping the railing as he watched the celebration unfold below. Ships from 1,000 different worlds filled the sky in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with victory lights. The sound of 1,000,000 different voices singing in harmony drifted upward, creating a symphony of relief and joy that had never been heard before in galactic history. "We did it," whispered Chancellor Morvac, her crystalline form shimmering with barely contained excitement. "After all these years, all the losses, all the pain, the Void Harbingers are gone forever." The other coalition leaders nodded in agreement, their various alien forms relaxing for the first time in decades. They had good reason to celebrate. The final battle at the Crimson Nebula had seen the complete destruction of the Harbinger fleet. Not a single enemy ship had escaped. The threat that had consumed entire star systems and turned populated worlds into lifeless husks was finally extinct. But none of them knew the truth. None of them realized that their victory had come at a price they couldn't even imagine. The hidden cost of victory deep in the forgotten sectors, far beyond the reaches of the Coalition's most advanced scouts. Something stirred in the darkness. The Kepler Research Station, humanity's most secret installation, had been monitoring the galactic war for decades. Hidden within a massive asteroid field and protected by technology that made it invisible to all known scanning methods, the station had been humanity's eyes and ears on a galaxy that had long forgotten Earth existed. Dr. Sarah Chen sat in the station's command center, her weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of dozens of monitoring screens. At 67 years old, she had spent her entire adult life watching the galaxy tear itself apart, always wondering if humanity should intervene. But the orders from Earth had been clear. Observe, record, but never interfere. Humanity had learned long ago that the galaxy was a dangerous place for those who drew too much attention. "Dr. Chen," called out Lieutenant Marcus Webb from his position at the communications array, "I'm picking up massive energy signatures from the Coalition fleet. It looks like they've won." Sarah nodded slowly. She had been expecting this outcome for months. The Coalition's combined fleets were simply too large and too advanced for the Void Harbingers to overcome indefinitely. But something else worried her, something that made her stomach clench with dread. "Marcus, run a full scan of our outer perimeter stations. Check for any anomalies." The young officer's fingers danced across his console with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, his face went pale. "Dr. Chen, we've lost contact with research stations Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. All three are showing as completely offline." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Those three stations were humanity's furthest outposts, positioned at the very edge of the galaxy to monitor threats from the void. They were equipped with the most advanced stealth technology humanity had ever developed. Nothing should have been able to detect them, let alone destroy them. "When did we lose contact?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. According to the logs, all three went dark simultaneously, exactly 17 hours ago, right after the Coalition's final victory at the Crimson Nebula. The terrible truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Coalition hadn't just defeated the Void Harbingers. In their final desperate push for victory, they had fired experimental weapons into the void itself. Weapons designed to destroy anything and everything in their path. They had unknowingly obliterated 3 human research stations, and everyone aboard them. 17 souls. 17 brilliant scientists and researchers who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity's secrets. Dead because the Coalition had been too eager for victory to care about what else might be hiding in the darkness. The ancient protocols awaken in the deepest levels of the Kepler Research Station, buried beneath layers of armor plating and quantum Shielding, something that had been dormant for over a century, suddenly activated. The Prometheus Protocol, humanity's most carefully guarded secret, had been designed for exactly this scenario. When human lives were lost due to the actions of galactic powers, when humanity's safety was threatened by those who didn't even know they existed, the protocol would ensure that such threats were permanently eliminated. The activation was automatic, triggered by the loss of communication with the outer stations. Deep beneath the station's core, quantum computers that had been running silent calculations for decades suddenly roared to life. Data streams flowed through hidden networks, reaching across the galaxy to sleeping installations that most humans had forgotten even existed. On the dead world of Zerion 7, where ancient human ruins were buried beneath miles of radioactive dust, something began to move. Massive doors that hadn't opened in 300 years slowly ground apart, revealing chambers filled with shapes that seemed to absorb light itself. One by one, the shapes began to glow with an ominous red light. In the asteroid fields of the Morning Belt, where space pirates feared to venture because of the strange disappearances that occurred there, hidden hangars opened for the first time in centuries. Ships emerged, if they could be called ships. They were more like living shadows, their hulls seeming to bend reality around them as they moved through space without any visible means of propulsion. And in the Titan graveyard, a region of space where the remnants of an ancient battle drifted endlessly through the void, something truly massive began to stir. The wreckage that explorers had always assumed was the remains of some long-dead civilization's war machines suddenly revealed its true nature. These weren't wrecks, they were sleepers, and now they were waking up. The first warning signs back. On Luminara Prime, the celebration continued with even greater intensity. The coalition leaders had announced their plans for a new era of peace and prosperity. Trade routes would be reopened, new colonies would be established, and the military forces that had been built up over 5 decades of war would be converted to peaceful purposes. Admiral Zephix raised his ceremonial cup of Andromedan wine, addressing the gathered crowd through the planetary communication network. Today, we close the darkest chapter in galactic history. Never again will the shadow of the Void Harbingers fall across our worlds. Never again will parents have to fear for their children's future. The galaxy is finally truly at peace. The roar of approval from the crowd was deafening. Fireworks exploded in the sky, painting the heavens with brilliant colors. Ships fired ceremonial volleys that lit up the darkness with harmless but spectacular displays. It was beautiful, joyous, and completely oblivious to the storm that was already gathering in the deep places between the stars. On the Coalition flagship Eternal Victory, Communications Officer Lyrian of the Cetacean Collective was monitoring the deep space communication arrays when something unusual caught her attention. For just a moment, she thought she had detected an anomalous signal from the edge of the galaxy. It was unlike anything in the Coalition's databases, and it seemed to be encrypted using methods that were completely unfamiliar. She ran the signal through the ship's most advanced analysis programs, but they could make no sense of it. The encryption was too complex, the underlying technology too alien. After an hour of futile attempts to decode it, she dismissed it as background radiation and returned to monitoring the celebration broadcasts. If she had known what she was truly hearing, she would have screamed. The gathering storm doctor, Sarah Chen, stood in the observation dome of the Kepler research station, staring out at the stars that had seemed so peaceful just hours before. Now they looked different to her. Now they looked angry. "The protocol is fully active," reported Lieutenant Webb from behind her. "I'm reading power signatures from installations across 17 different sectors. Some of them are showing up on sensors for the first time in centuries." Sarah nodded without turning around. She had helped design the Prometheus Protocol 30 years ago, back when she was a young researcher full of idealistic dreams about humanity's place in the galaxy. She had never imagined it would actually be activated. She had never wanted to see what humanity was truly capable of when pushed too far. "How long before the first response units reach Coalition space?" she asked. Marcus consulted his displays. "The advanced scouts should arrive within 72 hours. The main fleet—" He paused, his voice filled with something that might have been awe or terror. "The main fleet will arrive in approximately 2 weeks." Sarah finally turned around, and Marcus was shocked by the expression on her face. She looked older somehow, as if the weight of what was coming had added years to her. "Features in just a few hours. Marcus, send a message to Earth. Tell them that the Prometheus protocol is active and that first contact with the galactic community is now inevitable. Tell them." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Tell them that humanity is about to remind the galaxy why we chose to stay hidden." Outside the station, the first of the awakened ships was already moving toward Coalition space. It traveled not through hyperspace or any other known method of faster-than-light travel, but through dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. To any observer, it would appear to simply vanish from one location and reappear in another, as if the laws of physics themselves were merely suggestions to be ignored at will. The ship was beautiful in a terrible way, its hull seeming to be made of crystallized starlight and shadow. Along its sides, symbols glowed with a soft blue radiance, symbols that would have been recognized by any human scholar as ancient script from Earth's oldest civilizations. But these weren't decorative markings. They were warnings, written in languages that predated recorded history. As the ship moved through the void, it sang. The sound couldn't be heard by most species, as it existed in frequencies beyond their range of perception. But to those few who could detect it, the song was both beautiful and terrifying. It spoke of patience and planning, of justice delayed but never forgotten, of a reckoning that had been centuries in the making. The celebration on Luminara Prime continued, but deep in the command centers of coalition fleets across the galaxy, sensitive equipment was beginning to detect anomalies. Strange readings appeared and disappeared from sensor screens. Reports came in of ships' instruments malfunctioning near the edges of known space. Long-range scouts reported brief contacts with unidentified objects that vanished before they could be properly scanned. Admiral Zephyx received the first of these reports while he was still on the celebration balcony, and he dismissed them as equipment failures caused by the massive electromagnetic fields generated by the victory celebration. The last thing on his mind was the possibility that something was watching him from the darkness between the stars, something that had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The galaxy's greatest celebration was about to become its greatest nightmare, and the beings who had declared eternal peace were about to learn that some victories come with a price that can't be paid with mere lives or territory. They were about to discover what happened when humanity decided that enough was enough. When legends become reality, the silence before the storm. 3 days after the great celebration, the first signs appeared that something was terribly wrong. It started with the Outer Rim colonies, those frontier worlds that existed on the very edge of Coalition space. One by one, their regular communication check-ins simply stopped coming through. Commander Thane Vortis of the Coalition Border Guard initially dismissed these communication failures as routine technical problems. After 50 years of war, the galaxy's communication networks were strained and often unreliable. But when an entire sector went silent within the span of 6 hours, even the most optimistic explanations began to seem inadequate. "Sir," reported Ensign Kayla from her position at the sensor station aboard the patrol ship, Steadfast Dawn. "I'm reading something very strange from the Outer Veil region. There are massive gravitational anomalies appearing and disappearing across 17 different star systems." Thane frowned as he studied the readouts on his command screen. The anomalies were unlike anything he had ever seen. They appeared to be caused by objects of enormous mass moving through space at impossible speeds. But whenever the sensors tried to get a lock on these objects, they simply vanished as if they had never existed at all. "Could be residual effects from the war," he muttered. Though even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The Void Harbingers had used strange technology, but nothing like this. "Set course for the Rigel outpost. We need to investigate these communication failures." The Steadfast Dawn jumped to hyperspace, its crew unaware that they were flying directly toward an encounter that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The first contact, when the patrol ship dropped out of hyperspace, Near the Rigel outpost, Commander Vortis immediately knew something was wrong. The orbital station, which should have been bustling with activity from the 3 mining colonies it serviced, was completely dark. No lights, no energy signatures, no signs of life at all. "Full sensor sweep," Thane ordered, his voice tight with tension. "I want to know what happened here." The results were impossible to interpret. The station was completely intact, with no signs of battle damage or system failures. The airlocks were sealed, the hull showed no breaches, and the backup power systems were still functional. It was as if everyone aboard had simply vanished without a trace. "Sir?" Ensign Kayla called out, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm detecting something approaching from the asteroid field. It's big." Thane turned to look at the main display screen and felt his breath catch in his throat. Emerging from behind a massive iron-rich asteroid was a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a coalition dreadnought, but its design was completely alien to any known shipbuilding traditions. The hull seemed to be made of some kind of dark metal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, and along its sides, strange blue symbols pulsed with a rhythmic pattern that was almost hypnotic. "Unknown vessel," Thane transmitted over all standard communication frequencies. "This is Commander Thane Vortis of the Coalition Border Guard. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." For a long moment, there was no response. The mysterious ship continued its slow approach, its movement so smooth and silent that it seemed to be gliding through space rather than being propelled by any conventional engine system. Then suddenly the communications array crackled to life. But what came through wasn't a standard response. It was something else entirely, a sound that made every member of the crew stop what they were doing and listen in stunned silence. It was music. Haunting, beautiful, and utterly alien music that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly to their souls. The melody was ancient and sorrowful, filled with a grief so profound that several crew members found themselves fighting back tears without knowing why. When the music finally faded, it was replaced by a voice. The words were spoken in perfect Galactic standard, but the accent was like nothing any of them had ever heard before. It was clear and precise, but underneath the words was an undertone of something that might have been sadness, or anger, or perhaps both. "Greetings, children of the Coalition. We are the inheritors of a legacy you helped to destroy. We are the guardians of memories you chose to forget. We are humanity, and we have returned to settle an old debt." Commander Vortis felt the blood drain from his face. Humanity was a myth, a legend told in ancient stories. Everyone knew that humans had never really existed, that they were just fictional characters created by primitive civilizations to explain phenomena they couldn't understand. But the ship floating before him was very real and very dangerous. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Humans are just legends." The voice from the unknown ship carried a note of what might have been amusement. "Legends, Commander Vortis? Is that what we have become? How convenient for those who wished us gone." The revelation of truth. Before Thane could respond, his ship's communication system was suddenly flooded with data. Not random information, but carefully organized historical records, scientific reports, and visual documentation that painted a picture of galactic history completely different from what every Coalition citizen had been taught. The records showed a galaxy where humanity had indeed existed, where they had been explorers and researchers and peaceful traders who had established small colonies and research stations throughout the outer regions of the galaxy. They had been a young species, curious and eager to learn, with technology that was advanced in some areas and primitive in others. But the records also showed something else. They showed how the Coalition's predecessor governments had viewed humanity's rapid technological advancement as a threat. They showed secret meetings where alien leaders had discussed the human problem and debated solutions. And they showed the final decision, a coordinated campaign to isolate human colonies, cut off their supply lines, and eventually drive them to extinction through a combination of economic warfare and strategic accidents. The campaign had been remarkably successful. Within a few generations, humanity had seemingly vanished from the galaxy. Their colonies were abandoned, their ships disappeared, and eventually, Even the memory of their existence faded into myth and legend. The few records that remained were dismissed as primitive folklore, and the galaxy moved on as if humans had never existed at all. But the records now flooding the Steadfast Dawn's computers told a different story. They showed that humanity hadn't died out at all. They had simply learned to hide. For 300 years, the voice from the human ship continued. We have watched from the shadows. We have seen your wars, your politics, your endless cycle of conflict and temporary peace. We have observed and recorded and waited. On the ship's main screen, new images appeared. They showed human installations hidden throughout the galaxy, vast underground complexes built inside asteroids and dead moons, research facilities tucked away in nebulae where conventional sensors couldn't penetrate. And they showed ships, thousands of ships, all waiting in silence for a signal that had finally come. We might have remained hidden forever, the human voice said. And now there was no mistaking the anger beneath the calm words. We had no desire for revenge, no interest in reclaiming worlds that were never truly ours. But then you committed an act that could not be ignored. The final image that appeared on the screen was one that made Commander Vortis gasp in recognition. It showed the final battle against the Void Harbingers, the moment when the Coalition fleet had fired their most powerful weapons into the Void itself to ensure that no trace of the enemy remained. But the image also showed something else, something that had been edited out of all the official battle records. The weapons hadn't just destroyed the Harbinger fleet, they had also obliterated 3 small research stations that had been monitoring the battle from the edges of the engagement zone. 17 of our people died in that moment, the human voice said. And for the first time, the carefully controlled tone cracked slightly. 17 scientists and researchers who had spent their lives studying the galaxy's most dangerous threats, trying to find ways to make the cosmos safer for all life. They died because your leaders were too eager for victory to care about what else might be in their line of fire. The choice Commander Vortis found his voice at last, though it came out as barely more than a croak. We didn't know. We had no idea. You were there. It was an accident. Yes, the human voice agreed. It was an accident. But it was an accident born of the same arrogance and disregard for life that drove our people into hiding 3 centuries ago. And now, that debt must be paid. Around the human ship, space itself seemed to shimmer and bend. More ships appeared, simply materializing out of nothingness as if they had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Within minutes, the Steadfast Dawn was surrounded by a fleet of vessels unlike anything in the Coalition's databases. Some of the ships were elegant and organic-looking, their hulls flowing in curves that suggested they had been grown rather than built. Others were angular and geometric, covered in crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. And a few were so alien in design that the mind struggled to process what it was seeing, as if they existed partially in dimensions that normal space couldn't contain. You have a choice to make, Commander Vortis, the human voice said. You can return to your leaders and deliver our message, or you can join the 17 souls who died because of Coalition arrogance. We prefer the former option, but we are prepared for either outcome. Thane looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. Some looked terrified, others seemed resigned, but a few showed something that might have been curiosity. After all, they were looking at living representatives of a species that was supposed to be nothing more than ancient mythology. What message? He asked. Tell your Coalition leaders that humanity remembers. Tell them that we have spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment, developing technologies and strategies that their greatest scientists cannot even imagine. Tell them that we are not interested in conquest or subjugation, but we will have justice for our fallen. The human ship moved closer, its dark hull seeming to absorb the light from nearby stars. On its surface, more of those strange blue symbols began to glow, and suddenly Thane realized what they were. They were names. Thousands upon thousands of names written in scripts from a dozen different human cultures, all glowing with soft blue light. Every name you see represents a human life lost because of Coalition actions, the voice explained. Some died in the initial campaign to drive us into exile. Others perished in the hidden years that followed, killed by isolation and the constant need to remain invisible. And 17 died just 3 days ago, in the very moment when your people were celebrating their greatest victory. The ship's hull continued to reveal more names, an endless scroll of the dead that seemed to go on forever. The sight was overwhelming, beautiful and terrible at the same time. "We do not seek the extinction of your people," the human voice continued. "But we will have acknowledgement of what was done. We will have justice for the innocent, and we will ensure that humanity never again has to hide in the shadows because others fear what we might become." The message delivered, Commander Vortis made his choice. The steadfast Dawn was allowed to depart, its crew shaken but alive, carrying with them data recordings and testimony that would change the galaxy forever. When they arrived at Coalition Command, on Luminara Prime, the celebration that had been going on for days came to an abrupt halt. Admiral Zephyx listened to Thane's report in stunned silence, his blue scales slowly shifting to a darker shade as the implications sank in. "Humans," he whispered. "They're real, they're alive, and they're angry." Within hours, emergency sessions were called in every coalition government. The data that the Steadfast Dawn had brought back was analyzed and verified by the galaxy's best scientists and historians. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity had existed. They had been systematically driven to near extinction by coalition, predecessor governments, and now they had returned with technology and capabilities that made the coalition's greatest achievements look primitive by comparison. But even as the political leaders struggled to understand what this meant for the future of galactic civilization, reports were coming in from across coalition space. Human ships were appearing near colonies and outposts throughout the galaxy, always arriving without warning and always delivering the same message: humanity had returned. The age of hiding was over, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The celebration that had marked the end of one war had inadvertently begun another. But this time, the galaxy faced an enemy that knew all their secrets, had studied all their weaknesses, and had spent centuries preparing for this exact moment. The cheers of victory had indeed turned to screams, but not in the way anyone had expected. They had awakened something that should have remained sleeping, something that remembered every slight, every betrayal, and every life lost to coalition arrogance. Humanity was home, and they had brought with them the reckoning that 300 years of hiding had been building toward.